Hi, I'm Naomi Eklund, and we are going to continue talking about anxiety today because it is such a rampant issue. Anxiety has many different possible causes. One of the things that I think we want to pay attention to when we're talking about anxiety is the idea of human empathy. Now, empathy runs on a scale from people who are diagnosably empathy deficient to people who go all the way to what you might call an empath, and people who are technically called empaths make up about 20% of the population. They feel so much of what other people are feeling, it is difficult to distinguish their feelings from other people's feelings. So people are everywhere along the scale. Now, not having empathy can create a lot of anxiety for people because empathy is one of the things that helps us to relate to one another. And if you are empathy deficient, you can actually not feel that you're loved. You cannot feel that you're cared for. Empathy deficiency has a whole spectrum of possible causes and results, which we're not going to go into here. But know that it's existent and that it's possible for somebody to have anxiety because they're insecure because they don't feel loved. Now, these are people that sometimes we might quickly write off as not very nice people. And we forget that these people have their own suffering too. Somebody isn't kind to you if they're toxic, you want to avoid them. I'm not telling you to suddenly be nice to someone who's unkind to you just because they might have a disorder. But what I am saying is be aware of the fact that this is an existent thing for people, just as people who feel too much, which is an old way of saying stop feeling so much, and are considered empaths, feel so much they can't distinguish. People who are empathy deficient have a very hard time distinguishing how they're impacting others, how they're making other people feel, and how other people feel about them. So empathy is a spectrum. For people who are somewhere in the usual range, let's just say 50 or 60% of the population, it is normal to feel, to some degree, what the other person is feeling in response to you, your behavior, or a situation. This helps us to consider how our behavior might impact another person. This is a very important social tool. When you are dealing on the phone or online or through some form of electronic communication and you're not sitting face to face with the person, people can become very unempathetic and they can start to dehumanize one another. This is a challenge that we can see rearing its ugly head in many areas of our life. If you spend any time at all with social media, you can see there is a growing issue with dehumanization of each other and people going into their silos and not thinking about how they affect one another. If we're going to, let's take the example of a customer service person who is on the phone or on email or in some form of chat with clients and customers and prospective people who need their help all day long. As a customer service representative in this situation, you have a unique challenge because you can't see how the other person is responding to you. You can't see the visual clues that you would normally be able to read to tell if you're in danger, how that person feels, what their condition is. This naturally builds a certain degree of our anxiety. Think about how many times we've miscommunicated through an electronic device, even with someone who we're close to and we know. Text messages get misunderstood all the time. Emails get blown out of proportion all the time because we don't have the emotional context that we would normally have in our communication. Most people are visual, and if you aren't primarily visual, you still use visual clues unless for some reason you're not able to. You still use visual clues to understand how the other person is responding to or behaving. Suddenly, this entire venue of visual communication, signal, sign, expression, micro expression, body language is removed. So what happens is we listen closer and potentially we try to feel more. The issue is that if we're trying to feel, to increase our sensitivity and feeling, because those hearing more and feeling more really are only two ways to cope in the situation, you're trying to be more empathetic, you're trying to feel more and sense more. So what that does is you naturally might put your boundary down because you're endeavoring to gather information through different senses. But that other person on the other end of the line, the person who's calling you or texting you in a chat or emailing you, they are not concerned with what you're feeling. They're concerned with what they're wanting to convey. And so they're conveying a message to you and they're putting even more energy into it. They're making it more profound, more intense because they don't have the normal clues to understand if you are understanding them. So in a strange way, electronic communication is actually causing us to try and feel more, infer more from our communication. This isn't really a very accurate means of gathering data for people who aren't trained in some sort of art around listening or feeling. Because what it is it's two people who are heightened trying to convey information to one another. So naturally, anxiety increases. So what can you do about this? Well, first of all, understand that what you're trying to do is gather information. And one of the reasons we gather information in the first 30 seconds is we need to decide if we're safe. It is very important if we want to combat anxiety that we recognize that we're safe. This is where tools like presence and mindfulness and breathing come in. Because if you take a deep breath in and you recognize that you're in your office, in your chair, in your car, in your house, and you're sitting or walking and you are actually in a safe place. And if you mentally assess the situation whenever you feel anxiety and you remind yourself that you're safe, you start to bring your anxiety reaction down by calming yourself and by nurturing yourself and giving your survival mechanism the piece of information it needs, which is you are safe. Because the survival mechanism is solely designed to help us to survive. And so its entire job is to help us figure out whether or not we're safe. And it is predisposed to thinking that we're not safe because that's how it gets us to be alert and pay attention. So we have to consciously pay attention to our space. Look around us, feel the space, breathe, be in our body, be present, be mindful of small things like even where is the salt shaker? Where are my feet? What am I wearing? How does this fabric feel on me? Being mindful and present and breathing reminds us that we're safe. And that allows us to come back into our own space so that we're not pushing ourselves into that other person's space, So we're not getting their push of emotion and energy on the phone. And so then we're able to, sometimes people call it personal space, some people call it their own bubble, some people, people call it a lot of things. But this whole idea that we have a space around us that is our own personal safe space. And if we can bring ourselves and our awareness into that in the present moment, that tends to bring our anxiety down. It tends to help our mind and our emotions to stop running in circles. It also gives our mind something to do. I have yet to actually find a Westerner who is able to quiet their mind. I am sure that someone has done it. I'm sure that it works for some people. What I find for most of us, though, is that if we give our mind something to focus on, our breath, our environment, the present moment, being mindful of the space, we're able to calm down. We also stop overextending ourselves empathetically to the other person. That means that we're able to put into perspective the power that they have and the power that we have on the call. It also means we're less likely to be defensive, less likely to be stressed, and more likely to be able to use our energy to access our resources and our training and the information that we have that we can actually use to help the customer. We have to remember that each of us are leaders in our own life, and that when we are in a role as a customer service person, in the role of a parent, and in many of the roles that we play each day, we have to have the self-esteem and the confidence to lead in that situation. And when we possess that confidence, we convey that confidence to the client, to the caller, to our child, to our spouse, to our friends and coworkers. And what that does is that enables us all to relax, because when we have confidence, then we have better access to the information that we've been trained to give the client. The client has more confidence in us, and the more confidence the client has in you, the less likely they are to badger you or be disrespectful in some way. The more confidence you have, the more you are able to keep yourself safe in this container, the more at ease you can be in general. Makes you better at everything and doesn't waste as much energy. For those people who lack empathy, I advise that you find a counselor and or do some research, because there are ways that you can develop empathy. And some of those ways are thinking about how other people might feel, intentionally asking yourself questions that lead you to care about the effects of your behavior on others, and intentionally asking yourself questions and reflecting on the positive emotional feedback that other people are giving you that you might not have known how to read. There are a lot of tools, and that is a special area that I don't have a lot of personal experience in, and all I can do is say it is a really good idea for you to get some assistance there. Where I do have personal experience and I can speak more with more experience to is being what is called an empath. And being an empath means that it is very difficult to distinguish your feelings from other people's feelings. Unlike the normal empathetic person, the person who is an empath is often overwhelmed and flooded by other people's emotions. Again, there's a terrific body of work on what it means to be an empath and tools for an empath. A couple of the primary tools for empaths are, first of all, to understand that you're an empath. And then you start asking yourself questions along the lines of, Is that what I'm feeling, or is that what they're feeling? How can I make sure that I am in my bubble and I'm not in their bubble? How can I make sure that I can take some deep breaths and I can clear out of my system or clear out of my thoughts the other person's thoughts and feelings? One of the things that go across all of these types of people is the idea of boundaries. And this is really important because if you think of a boundary as a pliable sort of a film that things can come through unless you don't want them to, that you can say, no, I don't want that in my space. But also something that you can voluntarily build a bridge with another person. If you want to be intimate with someone or very close, let's say your children, you want to hug them, they get to come into your bubble. If you want to hug people, you can hug people, which is why, even though it's in some circles very popular to hug, I still think you should look for some kind of a permission to hug people, because some people hug because they feel like they have to, and it's just really not the healthiest thing for everybody. So kind of ask, even if it's just by giving yourself a minute before you go in for the hug. If you're an empathic person, this is extremely important, that you know where you begin and end and where the other person begins and ends. Because that malleable boundary should never become a brick wall. And that malleable boundary should never become the kind of thing where you feel like you don't have the ability to grow as a person because you're overwhelmed. And you should never feel like you are constantly at the effect of others. And empaths often feel like they're constantly at the effect of others. You know, this is the type of person who they can feel your needs and they're always trying to fill your needs and hurry up and get this done for you and that done for you. And the empath is often left exhausted because they feel everybody else's needs. So if you know an empath who's overdoing, one of the kindest things you can say to them is, I know you care about me and I can take care of myself. So when you're in a work environment and you're an empath, one of the things you have to do is pay attention to your lane. Like, what is my job really? And this can be difficult when somebody calls you, they need your help, they're very upset. There's a natural extension of your own self to try and help that person. But you also then are crossing the boundary where you can't really help that person and you're wasting your energy and you're wasting your life force. And there has to be a learning of, where's that person? Where am I? What can I reasonably do to help them? Now, of course, in your personal life, this is something that involves a conversation with someone you love. So I invite you all to take a look at the video on boundaries. That will be immediately after this. It will be a great extended understanding of figuring out where you begin and other people end, and how you can, in a positive way, create a space that's safe for you inside of the home. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.